Hi there. I'm glad to welcome you to my channel, World of Stories. I have a lot of interesting life stories that I want to share with you. Enjoy listening.
As long as she could remember, Laura had always been terrified of horses. They were physically repulsive to her, massive with hard and heavy hooves. BRR. She never understood people who would pay money to have the dubious pleasure of riding these monstrous creatures. And the smell. The smell of the horse stable. Just the thought of it made her feel nauseous. Even when she only imagined it. She remembered a childhood incident that was the beginning of her phobia of horses. "Sweetie, we bought tickets to the circus." "Can you imagine?" her mother happily announced, hugging little Laura. "Is that where the clown performs, the one who was in that movie with Mukhtar?" the girl asked. "Yes, exactly that one. You wanted to see him, didn't you?" "Of course. Why do you even ask?" Laura smiled with anticipation, looking forward to seeing her idol, one of the most famous circus artists in the country, perform live. From a very young age, Laura adored animals. She couldn't walk past a meowing kitten without bringing it home, and she vehemently resisted when her parents said that you can't help everyone. "We can't turn our apartment into an animal shelter," they would say. "Well, not the whole apartment," she argued passionately. "Just my room. It's mine, right?" She furrowed her brow, clarifying as if they had deceived her. "So I can do whatever I want in there." Father is a prosecutor, a high-ranking individual, serious, always busy, but with a kind heart. He only smiled, partly surprised by such determination, but mostly approving, rejoicing in the strong character of his only and quite late-born daughter. And the mother, a tender, beloved mother. With a sigh of laughter, she carried another dirty, trembling little bundle into their luxurious bathroom in a skyscraper apartment. She scrubbed them clean in an enamel basin, along with her daughter, who got messy in the process of rescuing an unfortunate puppy or kitten after it had been saved, dried, fed, and warmed up and peacefully fell asleep in a box or a basket. She only made her tender voice sound serious when trying hard. "Ms. Jennifer. Please, don't allow Laura to get so dirty," said Laura's mother. "How do you expect me to keep her clean?" "By force," the elderly nanny reasonably objected, knowing her worth. "Why use force?" the hostess was embarrassed. "Nothing else can hold this girl back when she sees another homeless creature," the nanny waved her hands. "I just hope she doesn't run under a car across the street and then what they say." Laura managed to find homes for all the street wanderers she rescued among friends and acquaintances. Once a week, like clockwork, she would come to the bird market with her nanny and her closest friend, Rachel. From around the age of 10, she arranged the fates of cats and dogs without adult supervision, and it was astonishingly successful. "Sir, take the puppy. Look how cute he is," she persuaded a man who had come with his little son to see the dogs. "Why do you need a purebred? They're terribly expensive, and this one costs nothing. But he'll be a great friend for your son. Look at all the things he can already do." And she enthusiastically demonstrated to all those interested the skills of basic training acquired by the latest Sharik or treasure. People were charmed by the lively puppies and the energetic girl, eagerly adopting the fluffy and not-so-fluffy bundles into good homes. As mentioned earlier, Laura's idol was Yuri Nikulin. The film Mukhtar, which had just been released during her childhood years, she watched to the point of exhaustion, first in the theater, then at home. She enthusiastically marked with a red pen each upcoming showing of this masterpiece in the TV program for the next week. And now, finally, she would see him at the circus arena. Laura eagerly awaited this event, which was scheduled for her own birthday. Finally, Sunday came. New dress, 2 tight braids tied with colorful ribbons, shiny soft boots, the birthday girl was ready. It was time to go to the circus. Everything inside Laura sang and jingled, in harmony with the cheerful April day. The snow had melted a week ago. The clean city sidewalks had been rinsed by a soft warm rain early in the morning, and after breakfast, the sun appeared, hot and smiling. "Let's take the subway, please," she pleaded with her parents, missing their rides in her father's official car. Giving in to her persistent requests, the prosecutor and his wife took the subway. A few stations, then up to the surface and now on foot along the boulevard past trees enveloped in a green haze, past flower beds with recently planted flowers. To the circus. To the circus. With shining eyes, holding her parents' hands, Laura entered the cherished building. How wonderful it is here. So many people. Almost all of them with children, and in the foyer, they sell roosters on sticks, pastries, various sweets, and balloons. Clowns in the corridor walk marionettes on strings, comically moving their hands and feet. They are the same clowns, only puppets. After waiting in a long line, Laura's parents bought her ice cream and a big helium balloon. They walked down the corridor, looked at portraits of famous circus artists, photographs from past performances, and finally heard the first bell, signaling the upcoming show. They had the best seats in the front row. Laura and her parents sat across from where the artists would enter the arena, and the girl held her breath, anticipating her meeting with her idol. However, this meeting had to be awaited quite a long time. First, there were acrobats, trained dogs, jugglers, and more, and finally, when Laura was tired of waiting, 2 clowns came out. In the first few moments, she didn't recognize her favorite clown under the makeup, and her father quietly explained to her which one of the 2 was Nicolin. The little enthusiastic audience member in the front row was remembered, and in the next act, she was unexpectedly invited onto the arena. Laura couldn't believe her ears when her favorite artist pointed to her with his own hand and said cheerfully, "Yes, yes. It's you. Come here, don't be afraid." Laura hesitated, glancing at her parents. Her father was smiling approvingly, as if to say, "Go ahead, it's okay." Her mother was a bit scared herself but also whispered in her ear, "Go, Laura. Everything will be fine." So, she went. She walked onto the arena and immediately saw so many curious faces and eyes that her head spun from excitement. "Now, we will find out where that piece of sugar disappeared to. Let's check right now." With these words, the clown carefully pulled a piece of sugar out of the pocket of Laura's fancy dress, which was definitely not there before. Laura was absolutely sure of this and looked at the sugar with astonishment and delight. And in the other pocket. Pretending to be searching for something in the opposite pocket of her dress, the artist winked at the girl, opened his palm, and handed her a flower made skillfully from a silk handkerchief. "Oh, thank you." Laura accepted the gift with shining eyes. "Now let's go and treat our horse, Bun." The clown announced loudly, but it was a different clown. He grabbed the girl's hand without ceremony and pulled her toward a dwarf white horse with gray apples, small braids adorned with flower garlands in its mane. When the horse saw them approaching, it let out a loud neigh that startled Laura. "Give her a piece of sugar." "Don't be afraid," the clown ordered, but the girl, seeing the excessively large and scary yellow teeth of the horse, pulled her hand behind her back. The horse sensed her fear, shook its head, and made the same sound again, neigh, neigh. And she ominously stamped her heavy round hoof, the clown said quietly but sternly, not expecting such a turn of events. "Give me your hand." "I said, give it to me." Laura, tears welling up, reluctantly extended her hand. He placed a piece of sugar in it and held Laura's hand up to the horse's terrifying face. Feeling the warm and ticklish horse lips on her palm, Laura jerked her hand away as if shocked. The horse also recoiled, neighed, and bit her hand with its huge, sharp teeth. Laura screamed loudly, turning beet red, and managed to pull herself away from the scary clown, rushing across the arena towards her parents. Her father was already running towards her, picked her up, and held her in his arms. "Daddy," the crying girl exclaimed. "Daddy, that ugly horse bit me." Of course, nothing terrible happened to her hand, just a big bruise, not even any blood, from the horse's blunt teeth passing by. But her childhood fear, which had gripped her heart with horror and disgust, and the smell of horse sweat, remained with Laura for the rest of her life. And now, more than 30 years later, from that memorable day, Laura, no longer a little girl, felt that fear again when her husband said, "Laura, Mr. Herman strongly recommends equine therapy for us. He gave me a contact. It's quite far from the city, but he says the conditions there are good, and the specialists are excellent. I think we should go check it out. What do you think?" Laura didn't answer. She closed her eyes, mumbled something indecipherable, and turned to the wall. She no longer cared about how or where to get treatment. Hope for a cure had long left her. So, is she in agreement? The beautiful young woman with attentive dark velvet but cold and impassive eyes quickly approached the imposing middle-aged man who had just left the room. Yes, who can decipher her? He shrugged, tiredly grimacing. She mutters something incomprehensible. Even better, the young woman replied calmly. No one can accuse you of neglecting your spouse. The doctor recommended this place himself, and we've got a perfect setup for you and me. Well, let's get out of here. Let's grab something to eat. I'm terribly hungry, she said cheerfully, giving her interlocutor a gentle smile. However, she didn't approach for a kiss or any other expression of affection. Clinic hallways were not the place for such displays. Let's go, the man agreed with a sigh of relief, and they departed from this abode of sorrow and suffering, unfulfilled hopes, and shattered lives. Laura, a 43-year-old woman, successful in every way, was now a patient in the neurological department of one of clinics, where she had been treated for the effects of a stroke for a month. It had suddenly shattered her well-arranged life, but the illness was relentless, cunningly throwing new challenges at medical science. Alongside the stroke, she developed insulin-dependent diabetes seemingly out of nowhere, dragging with it a sudden loss of vision, like a thread. One day, Laura woke up after a fitful sleep induced by medication and realized there was no significant improvement in her eyesight compared to the hazy embrace of painful morphine. Realizing she was almost blind, she screamed as if a drowning person had recognized the futility of their attempts to reach solid ground. Her cries summoned what seemed like the entire clinical staff. Doctors held an emergency council, and for a month, they tried various treatments for this new affliction. All in vain. It appeared that from now on, Laura would have to live, or rather, survive her days, almost completely blind. Before her discharge, having done everything possible in this situation, her treating doctor came to her room. He was a good specialist and a kind-hearted person, someone who had seen a lot in his lifetime but hadn't hardened his soul. Laura, I'll be honest with you. I recommend going either to Germany or Israel if you have the opportunity. Despite all our experience and years of work, we simply don't have the right medications. Do you understand? Laura, who had regained the ability to speak almost normally, though slowly and occasionally with a slight stutter, replied. I need to save money now, Mr. Fred. I doubt I'll be able to work as much as before. These trips might help, or they might not. Isn't that true? There's no 100% guarantee, after all. That's correct, the doctor agreed. But I'm almost certain. You see, you said almost, Laura smiled wryly. I can't afford almost. It's either it will or it won't. In that case, if you absolutely won't consider going abroad for treatment, make sure to try hippotherapy. Do you hear me? Definitely give it a try. Compared to medication in Israel, it'll cost you pennies, and the results can be simply amazing. So you're saying that horses, in some way, can replace a good qualified neurologist's work? And they can even replace expensive medications? Laura struggled to speak and let out a deep sigh towards the end of her long sentence. Yes, my so-called husband visited me a few weeks ago, she smirked. And he was also going on about horses, she shrugged, and it didn't come out quite right. One shoulder was higher than the other, and her eyebrows seemed to be stuck. Why do you call your spouse so-called? The doctor wondered, as he observed their communication from the sidelines and couldn't fathom anything that would cast doubt on their marital relationship. Wilson often visited his wife. He brought everything she needed, talked to her at length about her treatment, what steps to take, what medications to get, and he ended up buying the best ones for her. He spared no expense on his ailing wife. I would tell you, Laura sighed, but I'm afraid I won't be able to. So, please, just take my word for it. Of course, the tactful doctor nodded. But please do consider using the services of the rehabilitation center. I urge you. I've personally witnessed some astonishing results in patients with your diagnosis and in those with cerebral palsy and other complex cases. Trust me. I believe you, Laura agreed with the doctor. It's just a shame that she no longer believed in herself, not even a bit. When your own body suddenly betrays you so horribly, it's hard to find the strength inside to believe in it again. Well, are you ready, my dear? Wilson, opening the door, feigned excessive care and readiness to assist his beloved spouse. Laura grimaced. It was now nauseating to her, making her cheeks twitch. Maybe she wouldn't be able to control her own body properly anymore. But she was still in her right mind and hadn't lost her ability to think critically. Let him not think that she remembered nothing. Laura spoke to Wilson, infusing her words with as much icy contempt as she could muster at this point. Don't trouble yourself so much, dear. I'm sure you have a much more interesting subject for your positive emotions. And, making a gesture indicating that she could take care of herself, she slowly got up from the wheelchair she was already sitting in, ready for discharge, and made her way to the door. Her husband had no choice but to grab her bag. As they traveled together and afterward, when she was finally in her own apartment, in her beloved bedroom where everything was familiar and cozy, not clinical and alien, Laura repeatedly drifted away on waves of her memories. She understood in her mind that there was no point in digging up recent past events, it wouldn't do her any good. It would only make things worse. But she couldn't help herself anyway. All of this happened months ago, and as Laura now understood, these events were the cause of her rapidly progressing illness. On that day, she had come home at an unusual time, right after lunch. The lights were out in the office. Negotiations with the power supply company had led to nothing. They claimed there was a serious outage, and when it would be fixed was unknown. After waiting for an hour and a half without any progress in resolving the issue, Laura gave up on everything and quickly sent her employees home. There was almost nothing she could do without electricity, and it was getting dark early. It was October outside. In the mid-90s, only a few of her compatriots could afford expensive cell phones, and while Laura and Wilson both had significant means of communication, they hadn't yet abandoned their home landline number. After taking a shower, Laura was heading to the kitchen to boil some water when her attention was diverted by the ringing phone. The home phone rang persistently and loudly. She frowned, turned off the water, and picked up the receiver. I'm listening. This is Kelly from the Home Systems Company, a voice on the other end of the line chattered loudly. I'm calling to clarify your order. Are we going to install video surveillance only at the front door or also on the windows in the apartment? And regarding the built-in water purification system, which filter have you chosen from the options offered? This must be a mistake. Laura replied. We didn't order any of this. She wanted to hang up, but the manager on the other end was extremely persistent. Wilson informed us that he would pass our contact to you and leave the appropriate instructions. Isn't this his secretariat? No, this is our home number. Laura replied, surprised and somewhat bewildered. And which apartment are you talking about? Of course, your apartment in the new building, the girl said cheerfully. I apologize. I must have dialed the wrong number. Instead of the office, I called your home. Apparently, Laura replied thoughtfully and hung up. She had something to think about. Her husband hadn't mentioned anything about these installations. And why would he? They always planned significant purchases together, discussing everything in detail, as any good family would. And why would they need another apartment? Especially one so meticulously equipped with the latest trends, video surveillance, water purification systems. No, something didn't add up here. Could it be that Wilson had planned such a surprise without telling her? It seemed unlikely. Of course, his company was doing well, that was a fact, but not well enough to secretly buy apartments. According to his opinion, there was still nearly a month left before all of this would happen, but Gina and her doctor knew that it would happen very soon, possibly in just a few days. Realizing that she wouldn't get any action from Wilson on this matter, Gina decided to take matters into her own hands. Tell me, she interrogated the lawyer, resting her growing abdomen on the table over the past few months. Is there a way to secure this apartment in the divorce? Only if both parties agree on it, the elderly specialist replied without surprise. All right, Gina persisted. And if they don't? What if, let's say, she takes it, and then what? She is still disabled. She has no children, no close relatives. Who would the apartment go to then? If no heirs come forward, it would go to the state, the lawyer replied. The state? Gina exclaimed and thought to herself, oh, that's great. How absurd. And if they don't get divorced and she dies while still being his legal wife, then what? Then all her assets would go to him as the sole heir in the first order, the lawyer explained matter-of-factly. From that moment on, everything became crystal clear to Gina. She needed to do everything in her power to prevent this divorce from happening. She didn't care about her own marital status. As long as he acknowledged the child and transferred the money to her account, she had no need for a marriage certificate with him. There were only the details left, convincing Wilson to delay the divorce and removing Laura from the planned path. At the location marked on the map as A-Day Estate, there was a flat and clean field. And where is this center? Laura asked in bewilderment, more to herself than to the silent driver accompanying her. Suddenly, a towering figure appeared at the open window of the car, standing on a small hill somewhere to the side and above. She couldn't quite trace where he had come from. He leaned down and asked loudly, "Are you here for the horseback riding?" Yes, Laura looked at the giant with her one functioning eye, instantly realizing that he wasn't standing in front of the car but sitting on a horse, leaning slightly toward the window. An inappropriate laughter overcame her. "Is everyone here getting around like this?" she asked the rider. "Of course," he replied with a smile. "We are equestrians. Soon, we'll have you on a horse too." "But that's highly unlikely," Laura skeptically retorted. "Follow me," the man waved to the driver and spurred his horse so that it darted from its spot, kicking up a dust cloud on the dirt road. They crawled for another couple of kilometers behind the rider, fearing the bumps in the road. Finally, they approached some wooden structures, and the car drove through the open gates into the yard. It came to a stop in the spacious, well-maintained area. Everything here, as far as Laura could see, was made of wood, or almost everything, from what she could discern. "Where to from here?" the driver asked the rider who had hurriedly approached them. "You can unload here. We'll take care of our new guest ourselves," the muscular, sun-kissed man with thick blonde hair said with a friendly smile. He was quite a sight. Oh, if only Laura were a young beauty right now, not a frail and sickly wreck. Looking at this rider, so full of strength and health, she keenly felt her own vulnerability and realized how foolish and aimless her life had been. "Let me help you," he politely offered to Laura, who was struggling to get out of the car. She leaned on the man's arm and immediately saw something that took her breath away. Two huge dogs, by her standards, of unimaginable beauty. A tricolor Bernese mountain dog with a black coat and white-red markings, their intelligent eyes gleaming. They had large, expressive heads and stood very close. The woman couldn't help but notice them. "Bernese mountain dogs," Laura involuntarily blurted out. "Yes, you're quite knowledgeable," Peter replied approvingly. "You can tell a true enthusiast when you see one. It's a rare breed here. Only a few specimens have been imported into the country. But where did they come from here?" Laura continued to be amazed as she approached the dogs. They were friendly, readily interacting with her, sniffing her and wagging their tails while looking into her eyes. "We have all sorts of creatures here." Peter chuckled. "My father is a big fan of all earthly beings. We all are, who live here, to some extent. But his biggest passion is dogs and horses. You'll get to meet him soon, but for now, let's go. I'll take you to your room." Peter deftly pulled a stroller out from somewhere, set it up in a single precise motion, and rolled it over to Laura. "Please, have a seat." As they leisurely moved around the rather large estate, Laura eagerly took in everything around her, or at least everything she could see. She also got to know Peter better. He asked her about everything, her diagnosis, how she found out about their center, and he, in turn, shared and showed her everything he had managed to cover. In about 10 minutes of unhurried walking, they reached their destination, one of the wooden cottages scattered among the tall, amber-trunked, intoxicatingly scented pine trees. Peter rolled the wheelchair onto the porch and opened the door. "This is your half of the house, Laura. Your neighbor, Mr. Allen, lives on the other side of the wall. He's also recovering with us after a stroke. Our staff comes to clean and change the bedding daily. What else? Let me show you. The bathroom is here. Everything is equipped for your convenience, and there's a call button for assistance. We have them everywhere, in the rooms, the kitchen, and the veranda. Also, here's a walkie-talkie for you. It has a special wrist attachment. See? Peter demonstrated a tiny transmitter to Laura, which looked almost like a wristwatch. Please wear it at all times. It's waterproof, even in the shower. If needed, just press this button, and a staff member will respond. Understand? Yes, Laura nodded. Well, make yourself comfortable. I'll send an assistant to you shortly. Peter exited, and she heard his fast footsteps on the veranda, fading down the steps. Laura sank into a soft couch opposite the fireplace and took a good look around. Everything here was arranged simply but with undeniable taste. It seemed that the furniture, textiles, and all interior items were chosen with the same goal, to provide guests with coziness, comfort, and convenience. Along all the walls, at about the average height of a person, metal handrails were fixed. There were no thresholds at all. All buildings were single-story, with no stairs, and even the furniture had no sharp corners. Everything was soft and rounded. She liked it here immediately. Liked it so much that the terrifying horses somehow faded into the background. I wonder, what exactly does their therapy entail? Laura was still thinking cautiously. Could those horses be replaced with something else? They have dogs here, right? Maybe with dogs? What's the difference, really? As she sat there, pondering everything and nothing, there was a knock on the door. More as a notification than an expectation that someone would open it. A woman in neat, green medical attire entered the room. She looked like a nurse, only in green. Good day. I'm Rita, your assistant, she greeted Laura with a friendly smile and began explaining and showing her around. Upon hearing Laura's concerns about the horses, Rita reassured the newcomer that she wouldn't have to confront them here. No one will force you to get on a horse if it's difficult or scary. Don't worry, and after taking care of some things in the cottage, Rita left half an hour later, and Laura lay down to rest. As she drifted off to sleep, she could sense the pleasant scent of wood, some herbs, and wax. It was all very soothing. A feeling of lightness washed over her, and within a few minutes, Laura fell asleep. When she woke up, she felt better than she had in a very long time. She got up, shuffled to the kitchen, heated some water, and poured herself a fragrant herbal blend from a small teapot thoughtfully prepared by Rita. She drank 2 cups in total. All appliances and utensils were positioned conveniently at a low height. There were no hanging cabinets, and she decided to go out to the veranda. It was already getting dark outside, and although Laura didn't check the time, it was clear that it wasn't yet night. She poured herself another cup of herbal tea, grabbed the warm blanket prepared by Rita, and covered her legs. It was still April, not quite summer, and she gazed into the darkness. She couldn't make out much, of course, but for some reason, she wasn't concerned about that right now. She saw bright spots of burning lanterns. A faint mist wafted in from somewhere in the distance, and voices and laughter could be heard. Right near her cottage, the scent of early blooming bushes was distinctly noticeable. It all felt pleasant to her. So pleasant that the terrifying horses had completely slipped from her mind. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, a furry creature rolled onto the veranda and approached Laura's feet. It placed its warm head against her hand and licked her outstretched palm. Artyushka, a low, pleasant voice rang out. Don't bother the guests. Oh, he's not bothering me at all, Laura replied with a smile, not seeing her interlocutor at all. Why are you sitting here without light, Laura? The man ascended the steps, fumbled near the door, pressed the switch, and bright yellow light instantly flooded the space. I have nothing to see anyway, Laura laughed. I also enjoy looking into the darkness, the man agreed and, taking a lightweight bamboo chair, sat down next to Laura. Now she could somewhat make out his appearance. A simple and open face, smiling blue eyes, neatly trimmed beard, and large, calloused hands. His presence immediately put her at ease, evoking trust. He appeared to be in his mid-50s. "Let's get acquainted," he said. "I'm Mr. Albert, the founder and director of our assistance center. Just call me Albert. That's what everyone calls me here," he smiled, his mustache curling slightly. "And you don't have to tell me anything about yourself if you don't want to. Your medical records contain all the necessary information for our work." "But I want to tell you," Laura suddenly blurted out, even surprising herself. "Call me Laura, please. My medical records don't say that I'm just a fool. I found out about my husband's infidelity, and it upset me terribly." "That's quite a story," Albert said, smiling again. "Not bad for a start. Would you like to help me with the dogs tomorrow before the activities begin?" "Yes," Laura exclaimed happily. "What do I need to do?" "Feed them, brush them, change their water, and administer any necessary medication. Nothing unusual. I'll expect you at the kennel at 7 a.m. "And where is that?" Laura asked. "An assistant will guide you," Albert replied and stood up. "Good night, Laura." He whistled for his furry dog companion and disappeared into the darkness. 2 weeks later, Laura had fully settled into her new surroundings. She felt as if she had lived there forever. Her day now unfolded as follows. Early in the morning, she helped Albert with the dogs, and there was quite a pack of them. First, the genuine kennel, full of Bernese mountain dogs. Then 2 German shepherds guarding the territory. A few strays who had wandered in and simply stayed. Yes, they didn't turn anyone away who needed help. And then there was Artyushka, a lively terrier and the owner's favorite, who lived in the house, not in the kennel. Afterward, breakfast was taken in the communal dining room, where both staff and residents ate together. Following breakfast, there was therapeutic exercise, followed by free time, and then equine therapy. Laura truly understood what that meant when she finally mustered the courage to get on a horse, with an instructor, of course. Her uncooperative body had to find balance to avoid falling off the moving horse. Unexpectedly, some hidden capabilities of her body came into play during these sessions, capabilities none of the newcomers had suspected. In the first 2 or 3 days, Laura clung tightly to the instructor with her healthy hand, while the docile horse simply ambled in a circle, occasionally shaking its head. With each session, her fear diminished. Then came the real exercises. Starting with just a few seconds, the instructor gradually released her, though always ready to provide support if needed. Some patients who couldn't even get out of a wheelchair simply interacted with the horses. There were patients who had undergone chemotherapy, strokes like Laura, and various other ailments. They arrived with dim eyes, indifferent and desperate. They left the center rejuvenated, full of energy, with new plans and hopes for the future. Some stayed on at the center for an extended period, joining the close-knit team of horse enthusiasts. At first, Laura had been skeptical of the miraculous healing stories she heard from the doctor at the clinic. But one day, she witnessed with her own eyes a remarkable transformation. A boy with cerebral palsy, who had arrived in a wheelchair and had shown no interest in his surroundings before, began to speak and smile after just a month. Within 3.5 months, he was able to stand and walk independently. At first, he used crutches, and later just a cane. Parents who came to visit their son wept tears of joy and wanted to kiss Albert's hands. The key was that absolutely all the residents, without exception, found here, if not a complete cure, then at least a stimulus for a more optimistic and productive life. Many returned again and again. During the weekly communal meetings, they shared their stories of transformation and new achievements. Some learned new professions and found remote work. Others, thanks to the therapy here, regained enough mobility to move around without wheelchairs or crutches. Albert led the therapeutic exercise sessions for everyone. He was a former successful athlete who had suffered a severe accident. He now treated his patients according to his own methodology, emphasizing seemingly simple exercises, but when done repeatedly and combined with proper breathing, they produced astonishing results. Laura herself, 2 months into her new life here, suddenly caught herself holding a cup with her right hand, just as she used to before her discharge from the clinic, rather than her left hand, as she had done afterward. Gradually, mobility and flexibility began to return to her partially impaired right side. One day, as usual, Laura was busy in the kennel early in the morning. The Bernese Mountain Dogs had just given birth to puppies, and she was enthusiastically weighing each tiny, wriggling bundle on special scales with little baskets. She was monitoring the puppy's weight gain. Suddenly, she jumped back with a yelp. "Is that a rat?" "Where?" Albert approached, looking concerned. "Yes, there. It's sitting in the corner, shamelessly grooming itself." Laura pointed to the far corner of the kennel, where a large, fat rat with a bald tail was indeed perched on a pile of straw. "We need to do pest control again," Albert sighed, and then added, looking at Laura with curiosity, "How did you even see it from here?" They had long since switched to informal OU. "Well," Laura said, "I just did," and suddenly realized that her vision had indeed improved significantly. The medical examination conducted after breakfast confirmed that her vision had indeed improved. Her right eye now saw not just half but 80% of normal, while her left eye also improved significantly. "The most important thing is not to stop doing the exercises," Albert told her. "Even when you leave. I'll give you recordings of our training sessions. We provide them to everyone upon discharge. Those who continue to exercise and lead an active lifestyle, in the vast majority of cases, achieve even greater results." "Thank you," Laura said. "I'll do my best." But suddenly, a feeling of melancholy and nausea washed over her. At first, she couldn't quite pinpoint the cause, but while sitting on her small veranda in the evening, in the company of the Bernese Mountain Dog she had become close friends with, she realized that she didn't want to leave this place. She couldn't imagine returning to her lonely and empty city apartment on the 12th floor of an elite high-rise building. It felt so far from the earth, from joy, from life. She even shed a few tears of distress. Determined to find Albert, she got up and, holding onto Dog's collar to avoid tripping, walked briskly through the territory. The conversation she had decided to have could not wait. The director's house was located at the opposite end of the large compound, closer to the central entrance and not far from the kennel. His home, like all the other buildings here, was a small one-story log cabin, slightly set apart. It was surrounded by a living hedge of lush, flowering shrubs. Laura had never talked to Albert about his personal life, but from conversations with other local residents, she knew that he was a widower and lived here with his son, Peter. Peter was the muscular rider who had welcomed her on her first day. At the gate, there were arches set in the green hedge, entwined with blooming clematis. Laura hesitated as she approached. It was a bit awkward to barge in like this. Maybe she should wait until tomorrow morning. "Are you getting distracted again?" She scolded herself silently and sighed. She was about to turn back and head towards the kennel with Dog, guiding her to the playful puppies that would provide some distraction. But then, she heard a cheerful bark. Little Artyushka squeezed through the wide bars and bounded towards her, wagging his tail and expressing his joy at the unexpected visitors. In the darkness, heavy footsteps followed Artyushka, and soon Albert appeared. "Who do we have here?" "Ah, Laura." "Hi there. Everything's okay, or did something happen?" "Well, no. Nothing happened. We were just taking a walk with the dog," Laura replied, feeling a bit embarrassed. "Ah, I see. And you, little troublemaker, must have raised a racket," Albert joked, addressing the little dog. Artyushka sat down on his hind legs and raised his front ones as if apologizing for the noise he had made. "Don't scold him. He was just guarding his home," Laura chuckled, feeling a bit lighter. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something," she added shyly. "Well, come on in then." "You're welcome," Albert said with a welcoming gesture. "And you too," he said, addressing the dog. Both companions followed the owner through the flowering arch and found themselves in a small inner courtyard. It was so cozy and well-planned that the eyes found solace in the sight of flower beds, neatly trimmed lawns, and decoratively designed stone and wood pathways. Garden lights here and there illuminated this magnificence. What a beauty. Laura couldn't help but comment. Who takes care of all this? Peter and I, Albert replied. He's quite the amateur agronomist, actually. Peter? Laura was surprised. It was hard to associate the muscular, macho image she had of him with these agricultural tasks. Yeah, Albert said with a slightly sad smile. He gets that from his mother. Laura bit her tongue and silently walked onto the veranda, which looked almost identical to those of the other houses here. After Albert seated her on a wicker chair, he disappeared into the house and returned shortly with a tray. On it, there was a simple clay teapot, 2 cups, and a plate of rusks. He poured fragrant tea and tossed a rusk to the dog. Here you go. Your little favorites, he said to the dog, who eagerly crunched on the treat and then settled on a mat, resting her warm, furry side against Laura's leg. So, tell me, Albert said to Laura. What's on your mind? Any problems? Questions about your treatment? No, there are no problems. Laura hurried to reassure him. I mean... Well, how should I put it? She hesitated, not knowing where to start. Speak your mind, Albert encouraged her. We'll figure it out no matter what. I want to stay here with you, Laura raised a timid gaze to him. I mean, with all of you, she quickly clarified, fearing she might be misunderstood. I want to work, contribute, live here. I can't go back to the city. I just can't. I see, Albert didn't look taken aback, he had heard such words from patients often. You know, Laura, I don't want to come off as impolite, but for us to accept such a decision, we need to understand what benefit you can bring to our community. I understand. I understand. Laura rushed. That you can't just take on extra baggage without reason. You know, I used to be a good accountant. Actually, I worked quite successfully before my illness and then became a manager at a company that sells animal feed. I know that, Albert softly interrupted her. It's all in your file. You send us your application yourself. But yes, Laura sighed slightly, but then decisively raised her head. In any case, I have a completely different background in life. Is that so? What is it? Albert asked calmly. To have my own dog kennel, and if you find my help valuable, I'm willing to sell my apartment and settle here, or somewhere nearby, permanently. The price difference in housing will be donated to your center. It would be a joy for me, Laura said quickly, gesturing for Albert to hold back any objections. You can't imagine how happy I am. I have no one. No family, no friends. I never knew how to make friends before. It used to seem like everyone was insincere. It's only here, in your center, that I saw and felt that people can be different, kind, open. Really? Why are you laughing? Laura was a bit offended. I'm laughing because I'm happy for you, first of all, for your thawing soul, Albert explained. But regarding everything else, he grew serious, a vertical line forming between his eyebrows. This is a very serious decision, Laura. You can't make such choices on a whim. I've thought it through thoroughly. Laura protested. Don't think I'm some enthusiastic idiot. No one is calling you an idiot. God be with you. Albert smiled again. I can clearly see you're no accountant but a true dog lover, he chuckled, and Laura couldn't help but join in his infectious laughter. As for everything else, I would certainly be glad to have such an assistant as you. We're always short on time. That's true. But let's make an agreement. Take some more time to think about your decision. All right? If, after that, you're still as certain about your choice, then we have a deal. All right, agreed. Laura nodded with sparkling eyes. I won't change my mind. Don't doubt it for a second. But, you know, she added, I'll need to go back to the city for a week. Sort out some things that have piled up in my absence. Of course, go ahead. Albert stood up, indicating that the conversation was over and it was time for everyone to take a break. Peter will drive you there. That night, Laura couldn't sleep. Not because of pain or worry, as it used to be before. No, she kept tossing and turning, side to side, building happy plans for the future. In a couple of days, she would go to Washington with Peter by car. They left early in the morning and spent the entire day in the bustling metropolis, returning closer to nightfall, exhausted and crushed. During her time in the city, Laura managed to meet Kelly and get an update from her. She collected receipts for utilities and other household expenses, visited the management company for some necessary documents, and went to a law firm with real estate agents, among other places, to understand the algorithm of her actions in light of the upcoming changes. They also went to her doctor at the clinic where she had been treated. "You have an amazing progress. How do you feel?" the doctor asked with joy. "Did you consult with that center?" "That's right. I'm very happy for you." Afterward, Laura had some tests done and underwent a tomogram. She collapsed into the seat next to Peter, utterly exhausted. "Well, that's it. Now, home." And once again, she caught herself using the word home to refer to the place where she had been living lately. Automatically, she had started calling it her home. Gina gave birth to a daughter 3.5 weeks earlier than expected. The doctors explained to the happy dad that there was nothing to worry about. Sometimes babies are born at 7 months. The girl was healthy and robust. Dark-haired and dark-eyed. She didn't look anything like Wilson, but that didn't matter to him at all. "You're my beauty." Just like your mommy, he cooed affectionately over the tiny baby and showered Gina and the baby with gifts. While Gina was pregnant, she had been putting off the idea of a wedding, citing her condition. She would say, "How can I be a bride right now?" Wilson patiently waited for the baby to be born, and now, a couple of months later, he brought up the topic again. Gina had to reveal a bit more of her thoughts. "You know, Wilson? I really don't care about all those documents. You love me, right? Truly?" "Of course, I love you with all my heart, and our little angel too," he replied tenderly. "And I love you," Gina said to him with a sweet smile. "What more do we need? All these weddings, fuss. Right now, Angela and I need peace. Do you understand? I don't want any ceremonies. But at least let's register the marriage," Wilson insisted. "I will finally divorce when Laura returns from rehabilitation, and then we can get married." "Do you really want Angela to grow up as a child born out of wedlock?" "No, of course not. You're her father on the birth certificate. Do one more thing, establish paternity officially. Besides, look at what they told me recently." And Gina launched into strange explanations about how it would be great to claim part of Laura's apartment. "Think about it yourself," she insisted. "You and her lived there together for so many years. You definitely have a right to at least a portion. And if we compensate her for the other half, we can fully transfer the apartment to Angela. Our daughter could use an apartment in the center of Washington. Don't you understand?" Wilson, not wanting to openly argue with his beloved, kept deflecting with interjections and empty promises. He would say things like, "I'll think about it," and so on. But Gina had no intention of giving up and continued to press her point. One day, when Wilson couldn't contain his frustration and said something sharp in response, she pouted, went to the bedroom, and locked herself in, ignoring his cautious appeals. After some time, he had to leave for some errands. But when he returned, neither Gina nor Angela were in the apartment, and most of their belongings were gone as well. Wilson was terrified. He called and called, but Gina didn't answer. Eventually, she turned off her phone. In desperation, he sent her a message. "Please come back, my dear. I beg you. I'll do everything as you wish. Just come back." Sitting in the country house of a wealthy friend, Gina read the message, grinned, and said, "Look, Martha. It worked. Let's pop some champagne to celebrate." The next day, she returned to Wilson and presented him with her carefully thought out and approved plan, devised with the help of cunning accomplices. The plan was as follows: for a certain sum, the woman who had left Washington, Laura, could be declared missing, and later, deceased. According to the law, such procedures take a considerable amount of time, several years, but there was a legal loophole that allowed the timeframe to be shortened by the court under special circumstances. The shady real estate agents Gina had managed to connect with had already found a judge who was willing to cooperate. All that remained were technical details, such as transferring the inheritance. Since Laura and Wilson's divorce was never officially processed, and Wilson was still her legal spouse and sole heir, everything Laura had would legally belong to him when she returned. When she finally comes back, you'll pay her half, and that's it, Gina persuaded Wilson. Where will she go to complain? As a disabled person, no one will listen to her. Besides, she can buy herself some simpler housing and live just like before. We're not monsters, we won't deprive her of everything. Right? Very soon, Wilson began to think that maybe Gina was right. Why should his ex-wife get everything that's best for her? Enchanted by Gina's charms and frightened by the prospect of losing her and their beloved daughter, he had forgotten how, at the beginning of their relationship with Laura, she had been a successful, well-paid professional who essentially supported him, a jobless student at the time. She had supported him in all his endeavors, and back then, they hadn't even considered having children, even though Laura had wanted them. Well, what about kids? We haven't even gotten on our own 2 feet yet, he had said back then. In fact, he had no stable job for a long time. Wilson, a young engineer at the time, had been quite selective in choosing from the few job offers he received. It was only much later that he, along with a friend who was also an unemployed engineer, started their first company. They mainly used Laura's savings for the venture. Now, after several years of success, Wilson had begun to believe that he had achieved everything on his own, a real man, a success story. He had forgotten that Laura had sacrificed everything for his success, including her prime childbearing years. So, when they finally decided to have children, Laura had already passed her prime childbearing years. She had been on birth control pills for years, and when she decided to stop taking them and try to have children, she went to a doctor. It turned out it was already too late. The train had left the station, so to speak, and she wouldn't be able to conceive a child naturally. After reconciling with Wilson, Gina immediately set her cunning plan in motion. In a relatively short amount of time, everything was ready. Wilson parted with some of his assets, which, in comparison to the value of Laura's apartment, weren't significant. However, they now had a certificate declaring Laura deceased under unexplained circumstances. She had disappeared without a trace, and despite extensive search efforts, she could not be found. All the necessary documents and Wilson's statements, along with police investigation reports claiming that extensive search measures had been taken but yielded no results, were submitted to the case. With this certificate in hand, they went to a notary one fine day to handle the inheritance. That's when they encountered the main surprise. "Please, come in," they were invited into the office right away. Gina didn't like waiting in queues, so she had scheduled an appointment. Wilson, once again, felt a surge of pride as he watched everyone around turn their heads to look at his beloved. She was dressed in an expensive fur coat, branded boots, meticulous makeup, with a thick cascade of shiny hair, and diamonds on her fingers. She looked like a queen. "We have reviewed your application," the notary informed Wilson politely, a well-rounded and serious woman with evident experience. "And we have initiated the inheritance proceedings. You claim to be the sole heir of the deceased spouse, is that correct?" "Yes, that's correct," Wilson agreed, and Gina, sitting beside him, flashed a dazzling smile at the important official. However, the notary paid her no attention and handed a document to Wilson. In the unified notarial system, there exists a will dated from last year. Take a look for yourself. Here's a copy of it. The original is held by the notary, where Laura made this will. She bequeaths all her assets, including the apartment, several accounts in different currencies, and the country house on Varshavskoye Shas, to someone named Albert. Before Wilson could say a word, Gina, with a predatory grin on her beautiful face, leaned forward and exclaimed loudly. "What? Who is this Albert? This is ridiculous!" Gina exclaimed. "Calm down, please," the notary said in a frigid tone, accustomed to such incidents over her years of practice. "I have no idea who this citizen Albert is." He has not filed a claim to accept the inheritance. By law, he has several more months to do so. So, if he doesn't show up, we'll get the apartment? Gina quickly asked. The apartment, along with other assets of the deceased, will go to the lawful heir, as determined by law or the will. We'll find out more about that when the time comes. Do you have any other questions? The bewildered visitors remained silent. As soon as they stepped into the corridor, Gina paid no attention to the others and confronted Wilson. Do you have any idea who this Albert is and where he came from? Look. She pointed with her long, sharp fingernail at the unfortunate document they had been given. Who the hell is this? Calm down, Gina, Wilson whispered as he gently urged her toward the exit. Please, calm down. Let's talk at home. The deadline set by Albert to test Laura's resolve had expired at the end of April. Filled with determination, she returned to the city to execute her plans of selling the apartment and moving to the rehabilitation center for good. She intended to use the proceeds from the sale of the apartment and the old country house to buy a small roadside hotel near the city center and rent rooms to passing travelers. She planned to leave her bank accounts as they were and officially donate the difference to the rehabilitation center. A separate little house had already been built for her there, nearly identical to the standard ones for accommodating patients, surrounded by a living hedge. Laura loved it. Damn, what's going on? Laura suddenly muttered. We need to figure this all out urgently. She returned to the phone, pressed the caller ID button, and dialed the last incoming call. Miss, we were just talking about the surveillance cameras and the water purification system, right? Yes, I got completely swamped with work and forgot everything. Please remind me of the address of the apartment where all these works are planned. What? Well, yes, I'm Wilson's wife. Of course, the friendly voice on the other end replied. I remember you very well. You both came together, right? And the manager gave the address of the apartment. Excellent layout and a beautiful view. Beautiful, of course, Laura mechanically repeated and squeezed out, thank you. Have a good day. With her mind racing, Laura walked to the kitchen as if in a daze, placed the kettle on, and pressed her head against the cold window pane, feverishly contemplating. So, that's how it is? We came together? Imagine that. She smirked to herself. Together. Just think about it. Well, really. Why wouldn't we come together, right? Just a little oversight. I have no idea about any new apartments. Could it be his secretary? Such a young one. What's her name again? Gina, I think. Yes. Laura sadly gazed at the distant city lights. The view from their windows was also wonderful. Well, at least he didn't buy an apartment in the city center for his mistress. She involuntarily smiled at her own thoughts. Well, you know, there's always room for humor in life. Where the heck is this place? Maybe it's beyond the city limits. Does it even matter? Let him just try to come home. Let him try to explain, Laura thought, her anger simmering. I'll give him water purification. I'll show him surveillance cameras. Damn it. The worst part of this situation for her was that she never even thought that her husband had a lover. Everything had been perfect between them. Their friends and acquaintances envied their relationship. They lived so well, not only financially, although that too. A house, her apartment from her parents, everything was perfect. Wilson, after adapting to the new market conditions, started businesses with his friends, selling computers and other office equipment. Within a year, their business skyrocketed, and they even opened several more companies. Yes, she probably didn't know the true extent of her husband's income. Her own job also brought in a decent income. That was true. 3 years ago, Laura quit her boring job in her field and started working as a regular employee in a company that sold pet food. This new business quickly gained momentum. In just 6 months, with impressive results, she rose to the position of senior manager, then deputy manager, and a few months later, she was appointed as the head of the entire network of pet food trading companies. Laura loved this job. She had always dreamed of doing something useful for animals. Although her youthful dreams of a career as a dog trainer had been shattered, she had to adhere to her parents' plans for her future in a harsh reality. Her father had told her back then, "Get a proper education first. It will be your ticket to life, and then you can do whatever you want." A dog judge, not likely a suitable job for a girl from a respectable family. Her father's tone, resolute and authoritative as if passing a sentence, had determined the course of Laura's career. She enrolled in an economics university and spent most of her life working as an accountant. She earned a good living. Her father turned out to be right, but it was dreadfully dull. Now, the skills of an excellent economist came in handy in her new profession, and how wonderful it was to work in something that truly resonated with her soul. Another childhood dream of starting her own kennel of purebred dogs had been shattered against the rock of reality. Her husband is allergic to dogs. Actually, he was allergic to cats too. So, none of my beloved furry and mustachioed companions found a place in their impeccably clean and cozy home. They had no children either. It just happened. These things happen. And now, no one is surprised by it anymore. What? What is he missing? Laura thought as she sipped her tea, tears mingling with it, and waited for Wilson to come home. She had tried countless times to call him, to demand that he come immediately. But each time, she postponed picking up the phone, not knowing what she would say to him. "And in our intimate life, everything is fine," she continued, pondering the possible reasons for their marital cooling. Or was it just my imagination? My God, how can I endure these few hours until he returns home? There was nothing Laura could do. She couldn't cook or iron, everything slipped from her hands. She paced the apartment back and forth like a panther in a cage, tail swishing as if lashing out, like irritated big cats. She didn't have a tail. Eventually, she decided to go to the bathroom. Maybe she could relax there. Think everything through properly. When he comes home, how will she tell him everything? For heaven's sake. In the bathroom, the warm water and foamy bubbles somewhat helped. Her heart stopped pounding like mad. But the persistent thoughts still lingered. They were right there, spinning in her head, fluttering around. Laura was thinking she couldn't wait for her beloved to return home when she heard the front door open and the familiar footsteps in the hallway. "Laura. I'm home," Wilson loudly announced in his usual manner, and for a moment, it seemed to her that everything was just fine between them. Everything, as it had been before, was absolutely wonderful. And this stupid phone call was just a bizarre coincidence or someone's silly prank. Too bad it wasn't April Fool's Day today. "Where are you?" Wilson asked, having searched the apartment and not finding his wife. He peered into the bathroom. "There you are, hiding from me?" He saw Laura wrapped in a fluffy bathrobe with wet hair and wanted to hug and kiss her, as he usually did when he came home. However, when he noticed suspicion and aversion in her eyes, he recoiled. "Are you feeling unwell?" he asked. "Well, how can I put it?" she replied without looking at him. She left the bathroom, avoiding any accidental contact with him, and walked into the kitchen, standing by the window with her arms crossed over her chest. "What happened?" he asked, following her. "You don't seem like yourself. Tell me, what happened? What's going on between us, and why are you buying apartments in new buildings behind my back?" She turned around, her eyes burning with anger, and her face contorted in anguish. "Nonsense," he tried to imitate bewilderment. "Is it nonsense?" she screamed, losing her composure. "You call it nonsense? Is that what you call the apartment you bought on Avenue 16A, apartment 62, a two-bedroom unit with built-in water purification and a surveillance system, right?" "Where did you hear that?" her stunned husband stammered and immediately regretted speaking. "Would you like to know the source of my information?" Laura laughed hysterically, her eyes filled with fury. "Well then, dear, you seem to have forgotten that we chose it together. This wonderful apartment, number 62, 2 bedrooms with a built-in, whatever. And, by the way, we went together to their office last week." She struggled to find the right words, her strange state of mind a mix of anger and laughter. Some words seemed to slip away from her, though she remembered the meaning. Wilson stood before her with a peculiar expression. His face seemed to reveal guilt, regret, disgust, and even relief. At least, that's how it appeared to Laura. "So, who is she?" Laura screamed. "This woman you present to everyone as your wife?" "Huh?" She burst into laughter. "Gina, your secretary, perhaps? The tall, silly girl who could be your daughter." "Laura, stop it," Wilson asked tiredly and left the kitchen. This added to Laura's rage. Well, what the hell? He left and wasn't even going to explain anything. Well, no, he's not going to get rid of her just like that. Without remembering herself, she flew into the room. Wilson was sitting on the sofa, staring in front of her with a heavy, fixed gaze, and holding a glass filled with something from the bar. Laura didn't get a good look at it. Until he left the kitchen, there was a small spark of hope inside her, somewhere in her soul or in her head, or maybe in her heart. What if it was just an unfortunate misunderstanding after all? But, it happens, doesn't it? But now it was finally and irrevocably obvious to her that it wasn't. What the hell is a misunderstanding? The truth, that's all. The ruthless and naked truth. Who is she? Screamed Laura, towering over her seated husband like a furious fury. The robe fell open. Wet and unbrushed hair in a disheveled mop, eyes flailing with lightning. Who is this woman, to whom you buy apartments? I'm asking you. She shouted again, but she didn't get an answer. Wilson stubbornly silent, sitting on the sofa with his stupid glass in his hand, and did not even look at his wife. So we're going to play silence? She grabbed a bottle from the table and swung it around, hitting it. No, not on her husband's head. She hadn't gotten to that point yet. She had a little control over herself. She hit the wall above the couch where he was sitting. Wilson jumped up, eyes wide. There was a wet stain spreading across the beautifully textured plaster on the wall and bottle shards splattered in all directions. What are you? He shrieked, swinging his arm at Laura. Come on. Hit. She shrieked, proudly raising her head and approaching him. Strike, you bastard. That's all you have to do, you bastard. Psychologically, you've already killed me. Then kill me finally. Wilson looked at her in longing and despair, lowered his hand, hung his head, and sat down in his chair again. Enough silence. Tell me, come on. Threatening tone said Laura, which his behavior simply pissed off. You managed to make such a mess. Summon the truth, tell the truth. Or courage is not enough. What do you want to know? In a flat, lifeless voice, Wilson finally responded, accepting her challenge. Everything. Laura said sharply. Come on, spit it out. If you have any decency left. Wilson sighed heavily. He went to the bar, took out another bottle and a new glass. He poured himself almost to the brim, and, drinking the contents in one fell swoop, threw the empty glass on the floor. Yes, I have another woman, he said, even with a hint of challenge, as if Laura were somehow to blame for it. Perfect. Laura replied with bitter irony, clapping her hands sarcastically. Act 1 of our family drama. Who is she? She added with a demanding tone. I won't tell you that, Wilson stubbornly shook his head. Oh, really? Laura responded mockingly. You think I won't find out? You're little Gina, I bet. No. He looked at Laura seriously, and she suddenly realized it wasn't true. There was no lie in his eyes this time, but there was something else. Regret, perhaps? Laura, he sighed suddenly. Please don't take it too hard. I'm certainly guilty before you. Very guilty. But you have to understand, we haven't loved each other for a long time. You're deceiving yourself if you think otherwise. I'm deceiving myself? Laura was astonished and couldn't find words to respond. She suddenly felt sick to her stomach, almost like crying. She truly wanted to cry. Quietly, plaintively, desperately, like hurt children cry, but she couldn't give him that satisfaction. She was too proud. So that's how it is? He unilaterally decided everything for both of them. He doesn't love her anymore, so she shouldn't either, apparently. Well then. While these disordered thoughts were swirling in her head, and a sticky web of resentment covered everything around her, Wilson continued to speak. She barely heard him, consumed by her own grief, but suddenly, through this thick gray haze, some new words broke through, and there was something in them that made her listen. "A child," he said to her. "We will have a child soon, you understand?" And then he smiled so clearly and tenderly at some thought or memory of his own, and added for some reason, as if what she had heard so far wasn't enough. "A little girl." Oh, how much unused tenderness was in those words. A child. A little girl. It made Laura want to wail, like a wounded wild cat howling in the thickets, trying to rid itself of a stray bullet stuck in its hide. But instead, she turned silently, managed to throw on the first clothes she found in the corridor, grabbed something, maybe her purse, and, slamming the door, rushed out of the house, as far away from here as possible. "Laura! Where are you going?" Wilson's shout didn't reach her ears, and she rushed down the stairs impulsively, not even thinking to take the elevator. "So that's how it is?" Her own voice in her head said, reverberating loudly in her brain, and Laura felt like her head had become huge and empty, like a big cast iron bell. How is that? A child. A girl. A child. These two simple words incessantly spun inside Laura, both internally and externally. They chased her as she ran down the stairs of the entrance. Child. Girl. She sobbed as she ran, getting faster and faster. Stumbling and almost falling on the concrete steps, she rushed out of the entrance, narrowly missing hitting a woman with a stroller who was just entering the building. "Have you lost your mind?" the young mother exclaimed indignantly. "I have a child. A girl. Can't you see anything? Are you drunk or something?" she shouted after Laura. But Laura, covering her ears with her hands to avoid hearing those dreadful words again, didn't stop. "Oh, God. Please, no. Why? Why is this happening to me?" she cried out as she ran along the sidewalk, not knowing where she was running or why. Laura had no idea how long she had been running, like a hunted animal pursued by hunters. Suddenly, she saw a sign ahead, a bar, next to an old windmill, and without thinking, she veered off her path, pushed open the pliable door, and tumbled down a few crumbling steps, finding herself in a dimly lit basement room. She blinked, adjusting to the semi-darkness. Compared to the sacred electric lights of the streets, there was much less light here. She climbed onto a tall bar stool and, with her voice strangely unsteady and hoarse, said to the bored bartender, "Pour me a drink." "What kind?" The bartender replied politely, long accustomed to customers in all states of mind. "Anything," Laura said decisively. "Stronger." "Okay," the bartender agreed, and a minute later, he placed a chubby glass filled with a suspiciously beautiful amber liquid in front of her. It was filled to the brim with crushed ice, topped with a slice of apple and a cinnamon stick. She grabbed the glass as if it were a magical salvation, her last hope, and downed it in one gulp, almost choking on the sharp, cold ice awakening in her throat. "Another one?" the bartender asked dispassionately. Laura silently nodded, unable to speak. After a minute, a new glass stood before her, and then another and another. What came after that, she didn't remember and probably never would. It was all for the better. She got what she deserved, fool. It's her own fault. These were the first thoughts that crossed Laura's mind when she regained consciousness on a hospital bed, paralyzed on one side. "What? What's happening to me?" she tried to ask, seeing a blurry face in front of her. It definitely wasn't Wilson, probably a nurse or a doctor. It didn't really matter. But Laura couldn't speak, only some incoherent thoughts raced through her mind. The face disappeared, and a thick white fog surrounded her. After some time, she would wake up again, only to be engulfed by the fog once more. This went on for quite a while. Laura didn't know whether she was still alive or already dead. Frankly, she didn't care. The only thing that mattered was the monstrous, overwhelming bitterness that was constantly with her, heavy, hairy, foul-smelling, and unbearable. Get her out of here. Please, take her away. Laura pleaded in desperation to the changing faces that sometimes appeared near her. Take her away. I can't take it anymore. I can't. Oh, look at the lady, grumbled an elderly woman, Laura's neighbor in the ward. She says, take her away. Am I not a human being? I doubt she's talking about you, the second neighbor, roughly the same age as Laura, said while peering at Laura's face. It's something else. Looks like something happened to her. When Laura finally fully returned to the real world, her ward neighbors had changed twice. She was the most critically ill patient in her unit. 2 months after she had been brought in by the ambulance late one night, she teetered on the brink of life and death. She only occasionally regained consciousness. The bartender who had discovered her in a strange state, moved by concern, had called the ambulance. By that time, she had moved to the farthest corner of the establishment and was no longer sitting but rather lying down, with her face buried in the table, showing no signs of life. They say there was more alcohol in her blood than actual blood when she was admitted, the paramedics chatted near the service entrance. What a woman. She's a real boozer, the receptionist in the emergency department agreed. And she brought it upon herself. Those who befriend spirits don't end up with anything good. Don't gossip about things you don't know, the nurse from the ward responded angrily. The patient is perfectly normal and well off. She just got herself into some trouble, that's all. So, she got drunk. Laura did indeed get drunk for the first time in her life back then, but also for the last time. Could what was happening to her now even be called life? Wilson had acted like a caring husband all the way to the hospital, as if nothing had happened. Maybe he hoped she would forget everything after the stroke? Could that happen? While lying in her hospital room, Laura heard all sorts of stories from her neighbors and nurses, but not in her case. She would have been glad to forget everything and live on peacefully as before. Although, there was no going back to her old self. Do you need something? Wilson cautiously peeked into the bedroom. Yes, Laura nodded, turning her head toward him with icy eyes that had frozen like those of a glass mask. I want you to leave my apartment as soon as possible. She uttered this sentence completely calmly, without getting worked up or raising her voice. First, it was the effect of the medications she was now taking for her guests. And second, because everything inside her had already healed. It was scorched and dry, like a waterless and barren desert. Laura. Wilson began in a conciliatory tone, but she didn't let him finish. Out, she said emphatically yet calmly. Away from here and out of my life too. You can go ahead and file for a divorce. You have a child, after all. A girl. Did she even happen to be born during this time? But she didn't intend to inquire about such details, just as she didn't want to delve into who this mysterious woman was, her lucky rival. Wilson stood in the doorway for a while, as if about to say something but changed his mind. He made a dismissive gesture and left. That's just perfect. Laura said aloud. Now I'll get a cat. By evening, almost all of Wilson's personal belongings had disappeared from the apartment, along with him. Laura, hobbling her way to the kitchen, found a note on the table. I won't leave the key for now. I'll come back to pick up a few things in a few days. Forgive me if you can. If you ever need anything, be sure to call. And what could I possibly need now? Laura chuckled bitterly to her gloomy thoughts. Maybe a nicer coffin, but even then, why bother? More and more often, thoughts about what would come next and what awaited us all on the other side of the unknown boundary began to visit her. It seemed that now, unexpectedly for herself, she had come closer to that boundary than ever before. Thoughts like these had crossed her mind countless times in life, but so far, she had preserved remnants of courage, small fragments of her previous optimism, which prevented her from taking that final desperate step. She had money. She had always been thrifty and financially prudent. It was coming in handy now. It looks like I'll have to hire some household help, Laura thought. She could take care of herself, albeit with some difficulty, but she could. That was already a big plus. However, when it came to cleaning, cooking, and other household chores, she would hardly manage alone. Most likely, she wouldn't manage at all. So, Laura dialed the number of a personnel recruitment agency and, after some negotiations, explained what she needed. More precisely, who she needed. A strong woman in her middle years or slightly older, but healthy and strong. Duties? Yes, just simple duties. Cleaning, some cooking, grocery shopping, and picking up medications. In general, that's it. Will you be taking care of a bedridden patient? A polite agency representative inquired. Laura shuddered inwardly, imagining what she would be doing if she were completely bedridden right now. No, it's not that bad yet, she suddenly realized, and it lifted her spirits. We will send you a few candidates, the agency promised. Are you going to be home tomorrow? At what time? Anytime. Laura smiled. Just not too early or too late. Wilson and Gina were sitting together on a comfortable, brand new sofa in their apartment. Are you going to marry me now? Gina asked, affectionately smiling. Of course. He embraced her and placed his large hand on her visibly protruding belly. Of course, my dear. She moved, he exclaimed joyfully, raising his beaming eyes to Gina's face. Our little girl said hello, Daddy. Gina responded with the gentlest smile she was capable of and rubbed her cheek against his like a cat. Our girl is saying hello to her daddy, she told him. I can't wait to finally see her, a blissful Wilson replied. My little sweetheart. Gina was in her 7th month of pregnancy, but with all her slimness and lean figure, which Wilson admired, her belly was hardly visible. It had only recently started to show. Is this normal? He asked the doctor, showing up with Gina for every appointment at the private clinic. Is everything okay with the baby? Everything is fine. The indicators are within the normal range, the doctor reassured the worried father-to-be. The girl is small but perfectly healthy. Trust me. Of course, there is still plenty of time until the birth, and we will conduct further examinations. But for now, there is no reason to worry. Don't fret. Your wife simply has very fortunate physiology, the gynecologist smiled, looking at Gina. I envy her, actually. Both women burst into laughter. When I was pregnant with my son, the doctor continued, I looked like a cow, pardon the expression. And I had edema. But Gina has none of that. She is perfectly healthy and beautiful. Moreover, she will soon give birth to a healthy baby girl. Hurry up. Wilson sighed. Are you sure it's a girl? Yes, with our new ultrasound machine, everything is perfectly visible starting from 10 to 12 weeks, the doctor replied. Of course, sometimes babies turn away, and then it's not possible to be certain, but that's not your case. We determined it a long time ago. So, you can start choosing a name for your daughter, and she smiled politely. She's beautiful. She'll be a little princess. Just as beautiful as her mom. Exactly. Wilson beamed with satisfaction. And she'll have everything the little princess could wish for. Finally, the visitors left, and the doctor, finishing up her notes, went out to the hallway to pour herself a cup of coffee and chat with the receptionists. Ugh. My face is tired from all the smiling. She wearily told them. They really get on my nerves. Especially that guy who tags along with his woman like he's tied to her, as if he wants to extract every bit of his money's worth for the appointment. But what can you do? We have to go all out for them. Exactly. Her colleagues agreed. The clients are splurging, and management is making a fortune, while we have to fawn over everyone. And on top of that, pretend like you don't understand a thing. The doctor concurred. What do you mean by that? The girls inquired. I have to lie to them all day long. By evening, my jaws must be sore. And they're all the most beautiful and the smartest. I sit there and nod in agreement, looking at them. It makes you want to send them packing. That's right. The administrator girls nodded. Well, all right. Here comes another one. And the young gynecologist went back to her office. She wished she could share the news about these rich and clueless patients with someone. But she couldn't do that, and she certainly couldn't tell that smug future dad that the little girl his mistress was carrying under her heart definitely couldn't be his daughter. Recent test results were clear about that. Gina was truly as beautiful as a sultan's harem concubine. A year and a half before the events described, she had suddenly become a young widow. Her husband, Mason, had been Wilson's business partner and had often attended joint gatherings with his young and beautiful wife. Every single man couldn't take their eyes off her. It was impossible to believe that such a stunning woman was sitting right there, within reach if you stretched out your hand. Women like her, with flawless skin sculpted by a skilled artist, a perfect figure with a high bosom, long legs, a slender waist, cherry-red eyes with naturally long eyelashes, and shimmering silky hair that cascaded past her waist, were supposed to exist only in the inaccessible paradise of Eastern palaces. Yes, perhaps also in movies and advertisements. But in real life? No, it was impossible. However, Gina was real, and she haunted the dreams of many, including Wilson. That's why when Mason, having indulged in some intoxicating potion one fine day, or rather one night, crashed his car and died without regaining consciousness on the way to the hospital, Wilson was the first to arrive at the young, distraught widow's side, expressing his condolences and readiness to help in any way he could. The grieving young widow didn't stay distraught for long. Soon, she was quite content, accepting the endless attentions of her late husband's friends and acquaintances along with expensive gifts. She felt no sorrow for her untimely widowhood because, during her husband's lifetime, she had never felt any love for him. She had married him, a poor village girl, solely for his wealth. She had come to Washington with her friend, who, although not beautiful, was ambitious. Right away, Gina went to work on her plan, frequenting expensive bars in the hope of snagging a wealthy and eligible bachelor. Considering her appearance, she succeeded rather quickly. She also changed her name, which sounded less pleasant than her exterior suggested. Her previous name didn't matter, it was impossible for city dwellers to pronounce it correctly anyway. The girl from a mountain village became Gina, the legitimate wife, and later widow, of a wealthy businessman. However, when her husband prematurely left this world, it turned out that he had more debts and creditors than assets, and Gina had to make an effort to secure her own future. Fortunately, she didn't have to make much effort. Upon learning of Mason's death, his so-called friends swarmed like wasps to dried apricots, each trying to outdo the others in flaunting their superiority. Gina had only to choose, and she did choose. She evaluated all the working qualities of potential future partners in life. And that's where the trouble began. In the process of choosing, something went wrong. Gina felt pregnant, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly who the father was. In the end, she shrugged it off. What did it matter, after all? She decided to give her elegant hand and stone-cold heart to the most suitable candidate. Now she acted more wisely. She had learned from her experience with Mason that judging a man's financial status should be based not on appearances, but on documentary evidence. Following her lawyer's recommendation, Gina found an excellent financial analyst, and within a week, she had complete, confirmed statements and information about the financial status of her suitors. Among them, Wilson stood out prominently. He was in his middle years, not particularly remarkable in appearance, but with enviable financial indicators. Of course, Gina didn't hesitate for long and soon reciprocated his advances. Poor guy was over the moon with happiness. She could see that very clearly. It was a pity, of course, that he didn't excel in other aspects, but that was inconsequential. He could provide her and her future child with a beautiful and carefree life. The minor obstacle of his existing legal wife didn't bother Gina much. She knew her own worth and skillfully reeled Wilson in. Within 2 weeks of their first date, along with all the implications, she informed him of her pregnancy. He strangely reacted with immense joy. But that was just perfect for her. Oh my God, Gina, he hugged her tightly. Is it true? Are we going to have a baby? I'm so happy. Yes, my dear, she replied in a honeyed voice, glancing shyly at her fiancé. I'm thrilled, but what are we going to do now? Will our baby be born out of wedlock? She pretended to be horrified and even shed a tear. No, no. Don't even think about it, he reassured her, alarmed by her distress. Of course not. I'll get a divorce from Laura. We've been living together out of habit for a long time. Besides, we don't have any children. I doubt she'll be too upset. A few days later, he bought a flat for Gina. It wasn't in the city center yet, but it was in a nice new building, in a decent neighborhood just outside the city, with a nearby subway station. The residential complex was excellent. Together, they decorated it and took care of all the pleasant arrangements, and Gina was, one might say, satisfied. However, Wilson was in no hurry to proceed with the divorce. He was afraid to break the news to his wife. Gina could see that perfectly well. So, she arranged a phone call supposedly from the servicing company. Oh, how she cursed them later, not her, of course, but the employees at that company. He gave them a piece of his mind, dissecting every detail of the call. The director even fired half of the staff afterward, for no apparent reason. But what did she care? The main goal had been achieved, and even more successfully than she had anticipated. The foolish woman ended up in the hospital with a stroke, and finally, Wilson filed for a divorce. But he reflected a lot, tormented himself. What a scoundrel I am. How is she doing there? That's how he referred to his former lover while she was in the hospital. And even afterward. Oh, my God. How will she manage there alone? She can hardly see anything, just a little with one eye. I should hire some help for her. No way. Gina exclaimed. She nearly hit you over the head with a bottle, and you're thinking about hiring help for her? Don't worry, she'll survive somehow, she's not a child. She'll find her own help. You said she has plenty of money, right? But we need to think about our daughter. Do you have any idea how much a child needs? Before you know it, she'll outgrow diapers, and we'll need to get her into a good daycare. Do you know how expensive those can be? I already checked, and I won't give our precious flower to just any place. Then there's private school, and later, a good university, probably abroad. Somewhere like Cambridge, you know? So our daughter can have dual citizenship and the freedom to live wherever she wants, even in Europe. And you're worrying about your ex-wife? Well, Gina. Wilson mumbled. Of course, you and our little one are my top priorities. Don't even think otherwise. Kelly, the elderly and good-natured Moldavian woman, whom Laura had ultimately chosen, became a true support for her. She had become Laura's eyes and legs, as her vision continued to be far from ideal, and there was little hope for improvement. Laura couldn't even work from home in her previous company anymore because she couldn't see anything on the computer screen. Eventually, she had to resign. Such a shame. It's truly unfortunate to lose such a valuable employee, the CEO said sincerely during their farewell meeting. I really hope your health improves soon, and we can collaborate again, Laura. We'll see, Laura replied vaguely and tried to end the unpleasant conversation as quickly as possible. She wondered again about her future. Who knew how much time she had left to struggle? Her savings wouldn't last long, that was certain. Her disability pension could hardly cover more than a few rolls of good toilet paper. Perhaps selling her spacious apartment and moving further away from the city center to a simpler place was the answer. It seemed that was what awaited her in the near future. Sighing, she sorted through some papers in search of a specific prescription one day. Armed with a strong magnifying glass, Laura suddenly stumbled upon her medical discharge summary, which she hadn't fully read until that day. Among her complex diagnoses and numerous prescriptions, she found a recommendation. It recommended hippotherapy, with a stapled note containing the address of an equine therapist. Laura pondered deeply. On one hand, she couldn't stand horses and anything related to them. On the other hand, no one but a doctor had ever recommended it to her. Germany or Israel was definitely out of her financial reach. But she still needed to do something about her health. Since she hadn't succumbed immediately to her affliction, she would have to figure out how to live, and she hoped for a better quality of life than she currently had. Her back couldn't bend anymore. One leg barely dragged along, and one eye twitched, almost unable to see. The messages from Wilson still came, although much less frequently now. He inquired about her health, asked if she needed anything. Laura, of course, didn't respond, nor did she block his number. She reasoned that as long as they weren't officially divorced, she might need him during all the paperwork hassle. One day, she thought it over and decided, why should she handle everything herself? She was now a non-ambulatory invalid, while Wilson was a healthy man. Let him deal with all the complicated matters. So, she sent him a message. Hurry up and initiate the divorce. Send a lawyer. I'll sign all the papers. The lawyer didn't keep her waiting for long. He showed up just a couple of days later, carrying a seemingly endless contract typed in such a small font that even someone with perfect vision would struggle to read it. What have you brought me here? Laura protested and pushed the stapled pages towards the young man with an expensive but cunning look. It's a property division agreement, he cheerfully announced. It outlines. I can read it myself, you know, Laura interrupted him mid-sentence. When you find the time to retype it in a larger font, preferably size 18. Haven't they told you I'm almost blind? No, the lawyer stuttered. I apologize. Apology accepted, Laura replied graciously and called out, Kelly, please escort this young man out. He can come back later. Come with me. Kelly said curtly as she emerged from the kitchen. This way. This way. Slippery character, that one, she added, casting a stern look at the visitor. When the lawyer with the cunning eyes returned to the apartment in the high-rise, he encountered a surprise. Oh, the owner isn't here. Kelly informed him, giving him a severe glance. What do you mean she's not here? The young man didn't understand. She's gone. She went to seek treatment. Left an address. Kelly handed him a torn piece of paper. On the scrap, in uneven and shaky handwriting, it said, Rehabilitation Center, and the address. Why did I agree to chase after this crippled old lady all over the country? The lawyer muttered angrily to himself and then remembered. Of course, he agreed because he was hired to do so, and for a rather good sum of money at that. Wilson himself arranged for Laura's delivery along with all her belongings to the required place. He didn't come in person. He knew very well that she wouldn't even open the door in such a case. He sent a driver in a large semi-truck and additional loaders to carefully move Laura's property, which was neatly packed. Laura's assistant remained in the city to take care of the apartment while the owner was recovering. Laura, now even more dependent on circumstances, reluctantly agreed to Wilson's persistent request for help with the move. When Gina found out about this, she was initially upset. She furrowed her beautiful brows, but then, upon learning that her ex-wife was leaving Washington in this way, replaced her anger with mercy. The apartment was becoming available, and she really wanted to have it. I hope this spacious apartment in the city center will remain yours after your divorce, she asked Wilson. No, he shook his head negatively. This is her parents' apartment, and I have no connection to it whatsoever. Well, what about it then? You lived in your wife's apartment for so many years? Gina marveled, immediately deciding for herself that she would do whatever it took to get the coveted apartment. It's probably worth as much as all your other assets combined, she said thoughtfully, implying the coveted apartment. It's valuable real estate, he agreed, not saying anything specific. He redirected the conversation to their upcoming responsibilities, such as the upcoming childbirth and all that. Upon her arrival, she was met with an unpleasant surprise. The lock on her own door had been replaced. Laura frantically pulled out her phone from her bag and tried calling Kelly. Unsuccessfully, the number was blocked. Sensing something was wrong, she became agitated but immediately forced herself to breathe deeply and calmly, as per the technique. Albert's heart settled down, the initial fright passed, and she returned to the entrance where Peter was waiting for her in the car. They discussed the situation and decided to go to the property management company to find out what was going on. Most likely, your neighbors complained about you. They couldn't reach you, so they forcibly changed the lock, kind-hearted Peter reassured her. But it turned out to be much worse. In the housing office, as soon as she handed over her passport, the woman at the window checked some information on the computer, her expression changed, and she looked at Laura with a strange, wild look before literally running out of the office, only blurting out, "Please wait a moment." She returned with an older woman with an experienced and seasoned look. "Laura." "Hello, Ms. Andrea," Laura replied, recognizing the unchanging head of the housing office who had been there for who knows how many years. "Wow, this is something." Ms. Andrea, for some reason, frowned instead of offering a normal greeting. "It's really you." "Well, of course, it's me. Who did you expect to see?" Laura laughed. "Well," Ms. Andrea sighed, seemingly hesitant to say something. "According to our records, you're listed as deceased." "What?" Laura exclaimed in surprise. "But you can see for yourself. This is some frustrating mistake." "I see," Ms. Andrea nodded. "And thank God for that. But according to the documents, it appears that way." "What am I supposed to do now?" Laura asked, feeling bewildered. "Someone changed the lock on my door, and I can't get into the apartment." "Your husband changed the lock," Ms. Andrea informed her. "He recently came with some document from a notary. It seems he's the heir. You'll have to deal with him now." Stunned, Laura sat in the car with Peter. He tried to reassure her and encouraged her to meet with her husband. They went to the nearest cafe, ordered something to eat, and Laura regained her composure enough to call Wilson. Apparently, the call didn't bring him much joy, but he agreed to meet. Laura sat there, tense and gloomy, waiting for anything to happen. Finally, Wilson arrived. "Hello, Laura." She barely nodded at him and asked, "What's going on? Can you explain, or should I go straight to the police?" "It's not necessary," he grimaced. "There's no point in going anywhere. You disappeared. I was looking for you, even went to the police. Now they've declared you dead. I've arranged the documents with a notary, and I'll soon inherit everything." "I see," Laura smirked. "Well thought out, I must say. I'm sure your new flame had a hand in this, right?" "Well, let me tell you, it won't work. I took the necessary precautions in advance." She stood up decisively and walked towards the exit. Wilson was saying something behind her, but she didn't listen to him anymore. She and Peter went to the first available office to find out where her inheritance case was registered. "This is a nightmare," she complained to Peter. "They've gone as far as burying me while I'm alive. Maybe there's even a grave somewhere in a cemetery? No, they won't waste money on graves." In the notary's office, there was a long line, but Laura confidently walked into the notary's room, ignoring the protests of the staff. "Good day. I understand that you're busy, and I've come without an appointment, but my situation is absolutely unusual. I've just found out that I'm dead, and you have my inheritance case registered." The clients sitting in the office nearly fell off their chairs in astonishment, their eyes widening at the sight of the living deceased. Only the notary herself remained unfazed, calmly looking at Laura and asking for her surname, first name, and patronymic. Laura handed over her passport. "Oh, I remember you," the woman chuckled. "Please wait a moment in the reception area. I'll dismiss these people and invite you in." The result of this visit was as follows. The notary, who turned out to be a very honest and practical lady, listened to Laura's story and advised her on how to proceed to protect herself and minimize stress and time spent. "This heir mentioned in will, does he really exist?" "Yes, of course," Laura nodded. "Do you trust this person?" "Absolutely, I trust him completely," Laura replied affirmatively. "Then let him transfer the inheritance to himself and then back to you if necessary. This way, you'll outsmart the criminals without spending a penny on unnecessary legal hassles. The will is properly documented." Soon, I'll be able to issue all the necessary documents to the heir. All right, Laura agreed. Gina was furious and distraught. Wilson couldn't inherit the property, instead, it all went to someone named Albert. Where did he come from, for heaven's sake? Gina, calm down. We'll buy another apartment. Just don't stress out so much, Wilson tried to soothe her. I want this one. Gina screamed in anger. This one. And you worthless wretch, couldn't even handle it properly. How will you buy an apartment? You said business has been going terribly lately. I don't want to see you anymore. You miserable bankrupt. Go to hell. Just like all the other losers. Are you even a man? Ugh. You're nothing. What are you saying? Wilson snapped. How dare you? We have a daughter together. This is my daughter. Gina devilishly laughed in response. She's not yours at all. What's gotten into you? Come on, get out of my apartment, so your presence won't stain it any longer. If you don't leave voluntarily, I'll find people to explain it to you. Laura's future unfolded just as she had dreamed: peace, a healthy lifestyle, beloved dogs, and the company of good-hearted people surrounded her for many years after the described events. The roadside inn brought in a modest but steady income. In her small kennel, she raised dogs with the same care and dedication as Albert and Peter. Her furry wards consistently won top places in various competitions, and her three-color fluffy puppies found new homes at lightning speed, despite their relatively high price. Albert became a true friend to her. Of course, after going through so much together. After the breakup with Gina, Wilson completely fell apart. He became ill and no longer pursued anything or went to court. After some time, Albert found some people who arranged a new passport for Laura. They turned her case around, as if they had picked up a stray dog, a nameless and destitute woman with no past. Through legal means, Laura was granted new documents, and she now had a different official name, Sally. The former Laura had died, and in her place emerged a new woman, self-assured, dedicated to her passion, helping the sick and the needy, and looking optimistically towards her own future.